It's a pleasure to be with you this morning and to share with you in this way. We ask the Lord to bless his word and for each of us together to enjoy what it is to sit under his word and for me to preach it, for us to share together in the glory of Christ. Having been a minister for many years in large churches in different parts of the world, something that often happened was when visitors came, after the service was over, they would greet you at the door, and sometimes they would say, because they saw there was a lot of people there, they would say, what's the secret, what do you attribute the success of this church to be? And I was always uneasy with that comment, the success of a church. So I sometimes reframed the question and said, well, I'll tell you something what makes for a healthy church. That's slightly different than the success of a church. In the Acts of the Apostles, we read from the end of chapter 2 and the end of chapter 4, a picture of what that early church was like. Something of the measure of what it was like. And I'm going to refer to that a little in a few moments. From time to time, I would hear people say, what we really need to be is a New Testament church. And I would say, well, I hope not. And they'd look at you with shock, especially if they're from Bible-believing evangelicals. Say, surely you're not saying, I am. That's the church when they didn't let women do anything, when they fell out with each other. Just be careful when you say, I want our church to be just like the New Testament church. Well, of course, we want many things to be like the New Testament church, but not quite everything. So reality is there. A healthy church is like, I thought they were going to do my sermon this morning, the kids, I thought, I might as well go home here now. The truth is that a healthy church is like a good meal. It requires the right ingredients, the right features, the right things that will make it tick, that will make it be the church we want it to be. Let me tell you about a visit I once had. I was preaching in the north of England, because you realise I am from the north of England. It's all right laughing. When I go back to England, they say, he's very Aussie now, isn't he? That's after 19 years, they actually say that. So I don't know what it is that they're picking up, but it's certainly, but I'm very Aussie now, apart from when it's the Ashes, and I'm certainly not an Aussie then. The truth is that we had this phone call at home. And it was somebody who'd heard a tape or a sermon, and they rang me, and they were from Kansas in North America. And they rang and said, we had a meeting and we've had some of your sermons, and we want you to come and preach at a mission that we're having in our city. It was a city of 10,000, they're all cities when you get to 10,000 in North America. But having said that, of 10,000, 8,000 went to church in that city. And I went to this place, but before I went, I booked the tickets and all went well. But I had something on the Saturday. I got to do 7 nights in a stadium. And before going, we had something on the Saturday, so I had to leave Manchester at a very, very later than I'd have wanted to. Got in the plane and fell asleep. Now, the desperate thing about falling asleep was I missed the cup of tea. I missed the food. I missed the whole lot. I arrive at Denver, where I'm being picked up by about 7 or 8 ministers, all in a van, that were then taking me across to Scott City, which was actually not far from Dodge City. Now, you've heard of Dodge City, haven't you? Just down the road from Dodge City. But the trouble was, that was 5.5 hours across. I'd had no cup of tea, no food. I'm on this journey now for the best part of at least 5. I think it would be 6 hours across. And they wanted to talk. They'd never met me, all these ministers. They wanted to talk the whole way. And I thought, they're bound to stop somewhere, aren't they? There's lots of places along they didn't stop anywhere. They're desperate to talk. So I arrived at best part of midnight at this house. Now, the Methodist minister's house I was staying in met me at the door. Now, it was obvious we were going to bed. He got pyjamas and a dressing gown on, and he greeted me at the door. I thought, oh dear, this is desperate now. And then I heard the golden words. He said, would you like something to drink before you got drink? I nearly got hold of the fella when he said that to me. So he said, yes, I'll see to that. So he went into the kitchen. Now, if you'll understand this, certainly the women will understand this. It was obvious that when he went to the kitchen that he didn't do this very often. His wife was already in bed. He got a tray, and I saw him playing around with this. And then he said, "Do you want anything to eat?" And having preached in America on a number of occasions, I know that they often have cereal for supper. Or some cereal would be great. So he got some cereal, and he gave me a tray, a cereal and milk and sugar, and then I had the drink. And he sent me down this little corridor. He said, "Yeah, your bedroom's here, this one here." He showed me into the bedroom, then pulled the door behind. He said, "There's an alarm on, so as long as you use the ensuite, no problem." So here I was in my prison cell now for the night, with in this little room, and I had everything there. Put the tray down, and got everything ready. I had milk and sugar. I'm now on sweeteners for obvious reasons nowadays. And I put the sugar on. The trouble was, he'd put salt in the bowl and not sugar. So it ruined both the drink and the food. So it was going to be another 7 hours before there was going to be anything to drink or eat. Getting the right ingredients is important. Getting the wrong ingredients is dangerous. And in any church, we want the right ingredients to make for a healthy church, not the wrong ones. So let me pull out one or two things. It seems to me that one of the ingredients of a healthy church is a church that's energized by faith. Not just talking about faith, but energized by faith. What we do, what we say, who we are, what it is that makes us the kind of church we are, is energized by faith, underpinning everything. It lies there as the secret of all that we say and do. Keeping a church building open at any cost is not really the heart of what it means to be a healthy church. People can be energized by the strangest of causes. But we are together very different, but we are together energized by faith. Dynamic spiritual energy is motivated by a worshipping community, by a church that is longing to be a church where there's nothing more important than to take bread and wine, as we shall in a few moments. There's nothing more important than being able to say prayers together, nothing more important than being able to take our needs to those around us. A meaningful engagement with the scriptures, a faith nurtured in Christ, helping people to grow. This ingredient stands at the top of the list for me. There's more things I want to say, but being energized by faith is something that we want to be. And when I go around the Presbytery, which I now have responsibility for, I'm wanting to say to people, teach people, lead alongside people and say, we want faith to be critical to everything we do and say. We want times to recognize that our zeal is not always all it should be. That our zeal waxes and wanes, and sometimes it doesn't have about it the fire, the power, the life that we long for it to have. Our ability to be appropriately a people ready to change, ready to be, ready to act, is always energized by faith. We don't want to just survive. We want to flourish. We don't want to survive, do we? Surviving is not enough. We want to flourish. And that healthiness comes when faith is at the heart of everything. Secondly, we want to be a church facing outwards to the world, not inwards on ourselves. We must be concerned about faith, yes, but we also want to be a church that has a daily life that's vital, engaging, and involved in the community in which we're a part of. We don't leave our daily work at the door when we come in, but we neither leave our faith at the door when we go out. That engagement is something that is real because we face outwards to the world. I ministered in North Wales for 9 years, and the church I was at, we redeveloped the whole of their building in many, many ways. The sanctuary was the place which we took special attention. We had new coffee bars, all that sort of stuff that makes for life. And we had the sanctuary, and we pulled out pews and we put in chairs. We did everything we could to make it as modern as we could. And at the entrance part of the church, which led out onto a main road, we had glass doors and glass frontage. And when we had the final meeting, when it came to putting everything together, somebody said, well, a great thing about that glass is it lets the people look in. I said, no, that's not its purpose. The glass is so you can look out. Looking in's no good. We don't want to be a church that just people can see what we do, that we've got good publicity. We want people to feel that they're being looked out on, that we're part of that community in a vital and living way. We must be actively engaged in mission. We must be a people ready to serve the community of which we're a part. God's harvest field is the world, whether it's in Australia, Korea, the UK, anywhere that we find ourselves in. We want to be a church engaged with that community. No Christian can serve the Lord in isolation. We want to be a community that unites in its purpose. We don't just want to be some set-apart community that thinks ourselves better than others. We are a community that engages with our world. Thirdly, as a church, we need to dare to do things differently. This is where lots of church people say, oh, I liked it up to now, but not this bit. We need to dare to do things. And even if you think you're really modern, we have nice songs, we're really young, we know what, that's not what I'm talking about. It's doing the things that are different for the whole community, whatever that means. We're constantly engaging in doing things differently. Of course we must embrace the past. We must rejoice in those things that have been. But we must be willing to do things differently. We must admit when things don't work as we start something new. We must be ready to talk and take positive steps. Just look at Matthew's gospel. Look at the gospels if you have the time to do that and try to engage with what they're saying. What do they do in terms of resonating with this message that I'm trying to communicate? Well, growth is important. Look at 13th chapter of Matthew and journey through that chapter. You'll find many examples there where growth is often unobtrusive, like yeast in the dough, something that's happening all the time. Growth needs to really engage with that community. It needs to be noticed like light from a city on a hill. Oh, that's important, isn't it? That's what we want to be. We want people to know what it is that we're about. The people in Turramurra, the people that come up and down the Pacific Highway need to know what we're about. And that's just not about having the right sign, but having good signs is important, let me tell you. But it's not just about that. It's something more. That if you live near neighbours, they know where you go. They know what you belong to. They know what it is you're about. And where growth is never triumphalist, but comes from small beginnings. Oh, read Matthew 13. You'll see that chapter of the kingdom parables talks about small beginnings. And from small beginnings, great things grow. The Spirit of God stirring dry bones, as the Old Testament tells us, into something that's lively. 37th chapter of Ezekiel. This tremendous sense of coming together to be a people. You know, it's much more complex than it sounds, this. In Wales, I had a big holiday church. When I had this big holiday church, one thing that we knew we had to do was welcome people. And I don't want you to be offended by this, but we welcome people to death. We welcomed them at the door. We took them down to the seats. In their seats, there were cards. We made sure, fill out the card, then we can follow you up. And then we had tea and coffee afterwards. Come and join us. And if people were slipping away, there was the steward ready to catch them, to point them in the way of the... And you think, this isn't what welcome really means. It's much more profound. It's deeper. It's where we really do make you and want you to feel a part of our community. Emphasizing the welcome of visitors is not enough. It needs to be something bigger, where we go out of our way because we want to know what it is. The attitude to children, to see children not just as big ones on the way up, but as people in their own right. People who can know what it is to be part of the community of faith. And we also need to say that older people matter too. They're not on the way out. They're not just people who've got a history. They've got a present where they are. So that together the whole community is vibrant and living. The New Testament displays a bigger picture, I think, of 1 Corinthians chapter 1, this picture of this church that's there. Christianity began to take some profile that was unique, a spiritual force for good. John and Charles Wesley, not only through their preaching but through Charles's hymns. Charles's hymns has one word that if you ever sing Charles's hymns, there's one word that you can't miss, and it's the word all. For all my Saviour died. All. And all's a very inclusive word. And it seems to me that that's really part of what our missional conversation's about. We really do mean all. And all that can engage in terms of a community. Then, moving on then to talk about the final word, but it's a little longer than the first three, so don't get too comfortable. The fourth one is this: a church must be focused and not frenetic. Not just a church that's full of activity. Sometimes we've got activitis, it's like a disease. We've got to make sure that everything this week has got something. There's nothing happening on Wednesday. Let's get something in on Wednesday quickly. Let's get something in. That's not the purpose of a healthy church. It is choosing those things that matter most and building a church and deciding that sometimes there are things we don't do. We could have a sermon on the things we don't do as well as the things we ought to do to be alive. A fourth ingredient is such an essential feature of any healthy church. There's a mistaken view around, that we must do everything. To be the vibrant church, we must do everything. We've heard of a church down the road, they're doing this. Well, we must do it too. No, you don't have to. To be a healthy church, you have to do what's right. And it's not just about activitis, it's about doing the things that matter, doing the things that will make a difference in our community, doing the things that will draw people to Christ. When was the last time we won somebody for Christ? And we saw the Holy Spirit so move through us that people were drawn and were giving their lives to his purpose, to his cause, and for the needs of the poor. When were those things the priority? That's what it means to be focused. Healthy churches do have a focus which is always on Christ. It does mean, however, public worship, leadership, pastoral care, administration, all these things are tied together with this focus upon Jesus Christ. It does mean proclaiming the gospel, the good news, and living out the gospel in a serious, meaningful way. It does mean enjoying what we do. Sometimes you look at people, it's almost as if the letter smiled before in the car park. You are allowed to enjoy church. It must be something that pours out of our lives because it's real and it's meaningful. The presence of God and the joy of being at the heart of the community. Chapter 2 and chapter 4, look at that church that existed in the early church. They had a real purpose. They had a real joy. They had a real sense of doing that work which God had called them to. Do you feel that about church? What did you feel like this morning when you said it's church this morning? Maybe even worse, ministers on holiday. What will it be like this morning? What did you think when you were coming to church? Well, one of the things that ought to motivate us ought to be that joy, that sense of real purpose. We're going to come, we're going to know what it is to leave that place with something new and something that's going to move us in the coming days. The presence of God is mediated as people work and pray, support and encourage one another. Interpreting the story of God's love in the community for each and every generation, creating and maintaining a welcoming community where people can be nurtured in discipleship. For me, it's a religious word, but I can't move away from it. Discipleship sits at the heart of everything. We don't just want to be those people. I'm a disciple of Jesus. The disciples were always learners. There were people who hadn't learnt everything. They were on a journey, and that journey was real and deep. Healthy churches take seriously being at the heart of the community. In the Acts of the Apostles, we notice that there was a sense of awe among the early church, a sense of awe, that they were really in the presence of God when they were together as a people. Hans Kung, the influential Catholic writer, said in his monumental work, The Church, that it's not part of the nature of the church to have a uniform worship or theology. He points to Ephesians 4 and suggests that in a quite unique way the opposite is true. He drew a picture of the different kinds of people that joined and were part of this lively, vibrant church. And I think we need to be that kind of church that has really a welcome. Not all churches display the right qualities. This is no secret. This is not this morning saying, if you only do these things, your church is going to be full next week. But I'll tell you this, if we don't do these things, there will still be empty seats. It's not a case that these 4 things are a magic way forward, but they're essential to any church that is serious about growing and being vibrant in our community. So this morning, I'm glad to share with you. And I really, I don't want you to feel good about all this. I don't want you to go home and say, oh, it was great, we've got all those things right, we've got 4 ticks. If you've got 4 ticks on all those things, I am surprised. Not that you've not got parts of all of them, but for all of us, we need to have some of those qualities oozing out of what we say and do and think and act. May God the Holy Spirit so move among us that we might be a ready church, a church that's healthy, a church that doesn't mean to say we've got everything right. I know churches where they've got big collections. Oh yeah, and that's important. Oh, big collection. You didn't mention the collection, did you? No, I didn't. Because it's a natural part of when you're a healthy church that you give. Just natural. But there are churches that have that. They have wonderful facilities. They've got everything going from them. But they're not healthy and they're not growing. Why? Because some of these things we've just skirted on the top of the surface of our thinking are not the priorities that are actually happening for us. But the Lord bless you, because you've got so many things going for you. But having things going for you is not the same as going there. You need to really be alive in those things. There's a widespread spiritual hunger, I think. Having come from one part of the world to another, I never expected for a million years that 19 years ago we would be moving to Australia. There's an Australian word, Australia. We don't say Australia. Never thought I would move here. But I tell you this, I think there's a spiritual hunger in Australia. That many people know that there's the need of something new. And wherever you go in the world, and I've been fortunate to preach in all kinds of places, in southern Africa, in places of the world where in Asia, I sense all over the world. One of my predecessors, Alan Walker, used to have an old-fashioned song. He used to have all his mission meetings, all of them. And I preach with Alan. All over the world, the Spirit is moving. All over the world. And I think that's true. And it's calling us to a new commitment, a new depth, and a new purpose. May God grant every one of us the kind of priorities that will make for a healthy church in our day and time.